Indie Beacon Radio with hostess Charlotte Canion. Welcome to Indie Beacon Radio, where creative souls can find help in marketing their creations. You can send questions for each show on Twitter using the hashtag IndieBeacon. Now sit back and enjoy learning about our guest for this show.
I'm your host, Charlotte Canion, author of the 2018 best self-help book, You Have to Laugh to Keep from Crying, How to Parent Your Parents. And we're privileged this evening to have Jim Johnson with us. He's a renowned author. Hi, Jim. How are you this evening?
I'm doing fine, Charlotte. How are you tonight?
I'm doing fine. Before we just dive into your book, I'd like you to tell us a little bit about your background and, where you're from, and so that our listeners can get a feel of who you are.
Well, I've been living here in Abilene, Texas, in West Texas for the last 30 or 40 years, off and on. I'm married. I've been married for 28 years as of November of this past year. I have a grown daughter that is living in Latvia as a missionary. And so she is serving in Eastern Europe with a ministry called Freedom 61. And she's been doing that off and on from that and doing working with Youth with a Mission out of California for the last 5 or 6 years. And with me, as far as the writing goes, I got a little bit inspired by the fact that I was a fan of TV shows such as CSI, NCIS, and Criminal Minds. And one of the things I did that kind of helped get me motivated to do that was that my brother is a poet. His name is Cesar Dubois, that's his pen name, and he published a poem and had it actually registered with the Library of Congress as an original work. So therefore it was kind of like, that's kind of nice. And then I got into stuff involving the supernatural, like vampires and that sort of thing, and I thought I would try to write something that was a little more Christian based, other than Buffy the Vampire Slayer or Blade the Slayer. And I came up with something called Soldier and the Lady, the Unknown Soldier Chronicles. And I based it here in my hometown of Abilene, Texas, where a guy that got bit by a vampire at a very young age, and then he turned into a vampire hunter because he had a bloodline that went back a millennia and a half to the winter areas of Russia, in the Siberian area. So it was kind of something that kind of got me started. But then as I started getting a little more into my writing, shows like CSI, NCIS inspired me to write books about killers, criminal procedure, the whole forensic side of what they do and how they discover that. And I got a really good interest in it. So I started doing some research. I started researching areas, places I wanted to, place my characters. And I created a character named Jason Vaughn. And he was originally from Snyder, Texas. So I kind of just built a series of books, 2 or 3 series around this guy and all of his exploits. So
when reading your bio, I read that you used to be really into comics.
Yeah, I was. When I was a kid.
Any of that influenced your writing?
Some of it did. I mean, a lot of the stuff that, was like Dracula and superheroes of any kind, would kind of spark some kind of interest in what you're doing. But it was more or less the, not so much the superhero aspect, but, the characters of the alter egos like Clark Kent or Peter Parker or Spider-Man. They were reporters, so they did research. They, purported the news. They did something that kind of got the public interested in what was going on around them to keep, everything from our nation's leaders to our local leaders to even people in businesses accountable for what's going on. That way, it kept kind of society in balance with the free press.
Let me ask you another question. Do you use characteristics of your family members or people that you know within your characters?
Yeah, I do. In fact, a lot of the people that I looked up to, such as my father, my mother. I have a stepmother as well, and a lot of these people influenced a lot of the parental characters that I had in my books. And but I have a lot of friends who are police officers. I have two friends who are FBI agents, and and I've known some Texas DPS troopers and sheriff's deputies. So these folks kind of helped also shape some of the characters that I put into my books as far as
So do you kind of let them, do you bounce some of your ideas and stories off of them before you put them into pen, or do you like to ask them to read it after you've put it to pen?
well, I usually, what I do is I'll ask them, just some ideas, for example, when say NCIS and the FBI work together, who would take the lead on certain investigations? And the FBI guys were very cooperative, and the first thing they said was, if it's something that is of a national security issue, we would normally take the lead. But if it is primarily a Navy or a Marine Corps matter, we back off and we let them do what they need to do, because then that way everybody gets a piece of the pie and everybody gets a share in the credit.
Well,
So
when we watch NCI, though, sometimes things get all mixed up.
Oh yeah, and there's a lot of healthy conflict because there's a lot of competition. And my character Jason Vaughn, when he was first in NCIS, he did that. He had a guy named Jonah Carver who was FBI, and they for many years butted heads. And they had a little issue one time where they butted heads to the point that both of their directors put them undercover together at a little place called the Capitol Grill in Washington, D.C. And what they were supposed to do is just to show that they could work together. That was the whole point of the exercise. Well, they did. What ended up happening was their directors ended up getting what they call somebody's mid-level meal, like an order number you'd pick off a plate. And those two guys got to feast on filet mignon, mashed potatoes, and cheesecake, and drink expensive wine for the whole night. And it put them on desk duty for a month. And that was one of those stories I kind of gave as far as, how far they had come from where they started as opposed to what they were doing then. And at this point in the relationship, when I write my first book, Black Widow Murders, Jason is actually a detective with the Savannah PD, and Jonah is still with the FBI.
Oh, well, when did Black Widow Murders come out?
It came out in 2007. I did it as a lot of my stuff is self-published, but I did it through CreateSpace at the time, and went through them to publish it. And it got a lot. I had 2 or 3 friends who actually read it, and one of them I found out was a cop who did not give their actual name, but gave a pseudonym for for the website. And he said that my depiction of this book was actually very real. He said it was very entertaining, and he said he couldn't wait for my next book to come out.
Very good.
Yeah,
That's a great endorsement. Right. Now, are you using that testimony?
Yeah, I do use it on the Amazon page, where I have my Amazon page. And I think when I redid Master Sleuth, which is the second book of that series, I think I put on there that these testimonies were actually put in, and that he couldn't wait for the next one to come out. So I was really it really does help when you have somebody in law enforcement who says, yes, this guy actually was accurate, was to the point.
That's very good. Early on, I want to back up just a little bit. You mentioned that your brother had a poem in the Library of Congress.
Yeah.
I'll have to say I have a poem that I wrote that's in the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. And it's quite, and it was before I started really writing. I did some poetry. Do you ever make any of your characters a little poetic because of your brother's influence?
Well, actually, not in the first 4 series of books that I did, but in this one where I start American Angels tag up, it's not until the next book, Blackout, that the title character, Tori Blanton, she waxes poetic and says a silly poem to, at the time she was engaged to be married, then she gave her ring back and had a little issue with her future mother-in-law, and then she waxed a silly poem to just say, take me back, make me your wife. And he was like, oh, okay, fine, I'll take you back. And he put the ring back on and kissed her, and everything was okay at that point. So it was called the devil. The name of the poem is The Devil's Rose, because
Devil's Rose.
Yes, because she like Jason Vaughn had an issue in her career early where she was part of a international operation to do drug interdiction, and it was led by Interpol, and the bust went south, and she ended up being captured and held captive. Well, one of the things that she did was she got so beat up and so bloodied and everything that to the point where when she finally fought back, she didn't just fight back like normal. She fought back to kill, to survive. And she would carve these little bloody rose tattoos on the chests of the guys that she took out. And it became a signature to say,
right. And that's what we find in the crime scenes is some of these that do repetitive, they leave something at the crime scene that denotes it was them again.
Oh yeah. Yeah. In fact, when Jason Vaughn was a Navy SEAL prior to his career as an NCIS agent, or as a cop, he was held captive during Desert Storm. He was captured and held captive, and his signature was that he took scalps because he was half Comanche.
Oh my gosh, that is crazy.
Yeah,
crazy.
It's crazy. It was one of those where when he escaped, he made sure that the Iraqis understood they were not dealing with a normal military man. They were dealing with a guy that you hit the wrong nerve. He was going to make sure you paid. And you remembered him.
Jim, I'm going to get you to hold your thoughts till we come back after this commercial. We have to, step away just for a few minutes. But stay tuned, because I know Jim's got some more exciting little stories to tell us.
Well, hello there, my friends. My name is Randy James, independent voiceover producer in the Dallas, Texas area, available to write and record a 30-second commercial, much like the one you're hearing right now. It's a great way to help increase awareness and exposure to your book title. It's easy to do. Simply call me and we'll brainstorm on a few ideas, and in a few hours, I'll whip something up and send you a digital file ready to use. Remember, call or text me, Randy James, at 214-762-1942.
What would you do if you had to put your life on hold to care for a loved one? I'm Charlotte Canion, award-winning author of the book, You Have to Laugh to Keep from Crying, How to Parent Your Parents. That was a question I had to ask myself some 16 years ago, and you'll have to ask the same question. I had a father-in-law with dementia, a mother with Alzheimer's, and a dad with Parkinson, all at the same time.
We Fiction is a fun, fast-paced writing contest for any author team to create a book based on what readers submit for plot, characters, locations, and even plot twists. Learn more about this unique contest at wefiction.dearindy.org. The 5th annual Authors Marketing Event is coming to Granbury, Texas, July 24th through the 27th. Join us and learn from the professionals how to properly market and sell yourself and your books. Go to ame.authorsmarketingguild.com for all the details. That's ame.authorsmarketingguild.com.
Welcome back to Indie Beacon Radio. Don't forget to like us, follow us, or subscribe to one of our many channels. Now, here is your host for today's show.
This is Charlotte Canion, and we've got the privilege of speaking to Jim Johnson today. Now, one of his books is called The Soldier and a Lady, and I know he hasn't talked a little bit about it. Tell us a little bit about your Soldier and a Lady, because that was one of your early ones, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a very early offering. It was about Dr. David Matthews, who became a Nobel Prize winning hematologist, And his idea was that he could find cures for cancer in the blood work, and could manipulate the blood work in such a way that it would help the body heal itself rather than going through exotic drugs, therapy, or gene research or anything like that. That was his niche of doing it. But the cancer research was also a cover because he was also a Taru, what I call a supernatural vampire hunter. Because when he was in an early age, he was bitten by a vampire, and then through a series of circumstances, he was transformed after getting a small bit of what they call vitae, or the blood of a Taru, and holy water. And this was administered by a Franciscan friar named Arthur Devane when he was a small child in the 70s. And as a result, then he grew up to fighting these creatures, and eventually stopped doing it just so he could pursue the career of being a research doctor and going through that process of trying to figure out, well, could he cure vampirism the same way? And that was one of his goals as well, was to find a way to cure vampirism through manipulating blood to where it would not be so, it would transform them back to human form or into something else other than a blood-sucking monster.
What does your wife and daughter think about you writing about vampires and and digging into the deep?
Well, I have an interesting story about that part. See, it was one of those things where my wife thought it was really weird, and when I started writing when I started writing this book back in 2003, 2000, it may have been 2006, 2007. I don't quite remember, because I had it like at that point. Oh, actually, it was in 1999, 2000 when I started writing this, and I started writing it. And I gotten it where I'd written it to like about an 80,000 word manuscript, and it was on a computer. I tried to save it one day. I went back to do it, and it disappeared. It was one of those stories where every writer has, where their manuscript just goes poof into cyberland, and you don't know where it went.
Yeah, so, I think that's happened to everyone.
But I had printed out a hard copy. We're talking about 200 or 300 pages worth of hard copy.
Wow.
So because my wife is a better typist than I am, she started typing it and started reading and started typing, and she turned around and looked at me one day and said, "I hate you."
Oh no.
she does not like to read that, but she got into it and she started reading it and started liking it, and it just made her like, "Oh, you had to do that to me." So,
did she have nightmares after she wrote 300 pages?
No, she never told me she had nightmares, so that was the nice part. So I guess because my characters are, good and very skilled to a flaw. But one of the things that made this character, David Matthews, interested is that the person who saved his life was a vampire herself named Dominique Dubois. And she had lived from the time of the 17th century and had known David since he was 5 years old. And they always had a very special relationship. And she was part of that development of him into a vampire hunter, made sure he had training, made sure he had protection until he was old enough to protect himself. And then eventually, because she was immortal and never aged, when he grew up, she saw an opportunity to find a way to get herself back into sunlight through him. And that was his goal as well. Part of his research was to help bring her back into the light of day without having to go through any painful process.
You make me think that there's honor among vampires.
There are. Well, here's the thing. See, the influences there for that particular thing were Forever Night, the Canadian TV series about the vampire cop, who was a Templar knight, and then he you know, ended up in Toronto as a, 20th century cop. And that was his thing, is he had a disease that he called phototropic disorder, which meant he could only work at night because sunlight would burn him.
Mhm.
There are people that actually suffer from that kind of disease, and their lifespan is very short, as far as years they can spend on Earth without, having some kind of sunlight or the nutrients that the sunlight brings.
Right.
But that was his way of dealing with the, not being able to do a job regularly. He would say, I got a disease. It burns me. I can only work at night. And they're like, okay, no problem. We can deal with that. So that taught me that there was honor among some of these monsters, And
So how many books are in your series so far? And I'm sure you're going to have more to come.
Well, the book with the Unknown Soldier Chronicles, I only have 2 published so far. One of them is in more or less in a form of, I think it's it's actually in ebook form. I don't think I have it actually in print, but Soldier and the Lady was the only one I had that I went through the whole process of getting published in print. And at the time that one was done through Publish America. And I don't know if you've ever had dealings with Publish America or not, but they were definitely what you would call a vanity publisher, where I had no idea that they were like this at the time. And when my contract with them in 2007 ended, I didn't renew it. So consequently, I only had the 1 book published through them.
So how are you doing with your you said you have your books on audio?
No, they're on. I have books on ebook, and I have some books that are published in print, but it's the later series, like with the Jason Vaughn case files, Vaughn NCIS, and another one called the Joseph Hampton Mysteries. I've got 3 or 4 books in each. The biggest bulk of them that I have in is the Vaughn NCIS, where I started with a book called First Test, and it ended with I had a brain tease for just a moment. The Midtown Strangler, and coincidentally, the Midtown Strangler was the very first case Jason Vaughn worked as a detective with the Savannah PD.
Okay, can you hold that thought, because we're going to
Sure.
take another break here. This is Charlotte Canion. We're speaking with Jim Johnson. Stay tuned, and we'll tell you more about his mysteries.
I'm Rox Berkey.
And I'm Charles Brakefield. We're award-winning co-authors, Brakefield and Berkey, of the Enigma book series. There are 10 books in the series, with book number 11 planned for release in January 2020.
Each story has a central technology focus ranging from identity theft to cryptocurrency and now AI wars. These adult techno thrillers pit cyber good guys against cyber thugs across the darknet.
In our world, technology is today's weapon of choice. You can enjoy ebook format, paper, or Audible. We want your feedback.
Until the next story, thank you.
Thanks.
Join award-winning author Jean Lant presenting her book Bag Ladies at the Lone Star Festival, a Texas-sized event at the event complex in Seguin, Texas on May 30th, 2020. Check out the lineup of authors, artists, and bands at lonestar.bookfestival.network, sponsored by Authors Marketing Guild. City of Seguin, Texas, Dear Texas, IndieLector.store, and HEB.
Thank you for watching or listening to Indie Beacon Radio. Our sponsor, IndieLector.store, is the only bookstore that pays authors their fair share for book sales. Help authors to succeed and enjoy a great book by supporting them at IndieLector.store. Enjoy a 10% discount with coupon code SHOPPER20 at IndieLector.store. Coupon valid until December 31st, 2020. That's indielector.store, coupon code SHOPPER20.
Welcome back to Indie Beacon Radio. Don't forget to like us, follow us, or subscribe to one of our many channels. Now, here is your host for today's show.
This is your host, Charlotte Canion, and we're having the pleasure of speaking with Jim Johnson tonight. Now, he's the author of A Soldier and a Lady, American Angels, something called Black Widow.
The Black Widow Murders, which is
Black Widow Murders. But I want to ask you, because we only have a few minutes here left. All of yours have seen vampires and a little bit of the demonic side, but you've got one called American Angels. Now, can you just give us a little synopsis, bait us on that one?
Sure. This is a little bit different. American Angels is a women's professional tag team who ended up with a federal task force in Corpus Christi. It's a fictional task force, and it's two women who wrestled in Japan, who came back to the United States, but they were also part of the federal law enforcement system. One was NCIS, the other originally was DEA, and then became a Corpus Christi police sergeant. And we take them through a case where they're working it, dealing with issues from the botched Interpol job that they were on, dealing with issues from the narrator's past, Tori Blanton, who is the person who actually narrates the story, and some of the issues she had where her family originally was Dixie Mafia, and she went against the grain and became a cop. And we deal with all the drama that's surrounding that as well. But eventually they solve their cases, they get tag team gold, and everybody, has a wrapped up, in a nice, neat package at the end of the story.
So it's still in your same CIA, FBI genre and mysteries and murder and dead people and.
But yeah, but they're not so much. Yeah, but there was not so much killing of finding a dead body in this one, as opposed to just trying to get back home and get into a routine of being cops and being wrestlers and doing something else. There is a situation where people do get killed, but it's more like in the line of duty, line of fire kind of stuff versus finding a dead body and then going through a process of a crime scene investigation like that.
Now, did you write this one in the middle of your other genres? Did you just want to take a break from the blood and guts, or?
Well, I'll tell you what happened. See, the books the following books, the Joseph Hampton mysteries, the first one, Foreman's Fortune, American Angels Tag Up, and a couple of others were, believe it or not, all contest novels through the National Novel Writing Month of the Month Writing Contest. So I decided I would just, take off. And the first one I wrote was the Joseph Hampton mysteries, which was called Foreman's Fortune. And Joe Hampton's a well-to-do private eye in Dallas. He gets a case from his mother because she's got a missing ranch foreman. Don't know what happened to him. And then his girlfriend, who's a Dallas police lieutenant, finds the guy. They find him dead in a, lofty, well-to-do hotel in downtown Dallas. So now they got to figure out who killed him, why they kill him, and they go through the process. But he's also a private eye, which means he can't really officially do a whole lot, but he could do stuff if something happens where Pam Hampton, his future wife, can't do anything.
It sounds like you got started because you did enter different contests and all. And I think a lot of us, written short stories that turn into books.
Yeah.
Can you maybe in 2 or 3 sentences, share with us how someone could take their short story and expand it where it would become a book?
Well,
Oh, is that a loaded question?
That's really loaded. I think that you have to first come up with a concept that really inspires you, that really just hits home with you. And then once you get your short story written, look at it, have somebody read it and say, okay, I think you can expand it here, here, and here. Add more character development, add some conflict, which is, protagonist and antagonist, it's always part of that.
Right.
And then finding that ending that really just seems to tie the bow up.
Yeah.
And leave it as a story.
Yeah. Well, Jim, we're about to end the show today, and it's been a pleasure speaking with you, but we need to know your website, how people could reach you.
Okay. I don't have like a general domain, but you can go to author08.wix.com/Jim-E-Johnson.
You want to do that again?
Yeah. It's it's author, like in as an author, all small caps, 08.wixsite.com/Jim-E-Johnson. And there's a list of books in 2 or 3 pages of where you can find them, and then they will link you to the books on Amazon. So, and now once I figure out how to, when we talked to Alan about getting the indie.
Say hello to your wife back there.
Oh yeah, no, that's actually not my wife. That's my mom.
My mom.
We have a lot of stuff going on around here all the time. But no, I have pages where you can go to each one, and then when you click on the book link, it'll take you to the Amazon page where it'll list the print and the ebook price.
Okay. Well, Jim, it has been a pleasure. We thank you for being on Indie Beacon Radio. This is Charlotte Canion, and I want you to remember, a rose is like a book. You can't know its beauty until you open it. And a book is like a rose. You won't know its full beauty until it is open. Until next time, have a nice day.
Thank you for listening to Indie Beacon Radio, where creative souls can find help in marketing their creations. To learn more about Indie Beacon services, to be a guest on the show, or to advertise on our show, please visit our website.
Indie Beacon Radio with hostess Charlotte Canion. Indie Beacon Radio is produced by B. Allen Bourgeois for Authors Marketing Guild LLC, copyright 2020. Voiceover by Randy James, Lydia Bello, and B. Allen Bourgeois. To be a sponsor of the show or for more information, please email us at info@authorsmarketingguild.com. To be interviewed for the show, please complete the form at radio.authorsmarketingguild.com. Music Always Rejoice by Ramcord